pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Tonight, we'll be holding a public hearing to consider whether the Near Beach Motel's lodging license should be suspended or revoked, and potentially the discussion to take any action thereon. So I just want to go over sort of the format that we will have tonight. We're going to open up to the respective parties first. They are going to have their time to present the town of Wells and the representatives from the Near Beach. There will be some time for some back and forth there. Then we're going to move on to open to the public. The public will have a chance to speak. And then after we close the public hearing, that is when the board discussion will take place. If the board has any questions throughout the public comment period or for each of the representatives, they will ask questions, but we will not be entering into any form of debate at that time until the end of the meeting amongst ourselves, at which point, if there's any questions further that we have, we'll call on the respective party for that. Any comment I ask gets directed towards the chair. We will not direct it towards, a individual party. So that goes through me, and we of course ask if there's any comment that it's kept respectful and on point. That being said, the board would like to call the representative for the town of Wells first. If you could please step up. Leah, I assume you're gonna be doing that?
I am, yes,
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. So for the record, my name is Leah Rayton. I am an attorney with Drummond Woodson, and I am here on behalf of the code office. And so as Mr. Chairman, you'd said, I will be asking questions regarding evidence that will be relevant to your decision this evening. And the folks that I will be speaking to are Jodine Adams, who's the code enforcement officer, and I'd also like to call Chief Dupuis as well. And I know that this is a public proceeding. I understand that, rules of evidence, not a court of law, rules of evidence don't apply. But I'd like, just to make sure the record is clear, you have received the exhibits which we had circulated earlier. I think it was Thursday that had been circulated. It's like a 300 and something page document, which I will be referring to. It's up on the screen, but I just want to make sure that you've received that. And those will be, as I go through the questions of the various witnesses, I'm going to be referring to those documents. But just because this is fairly informal, I was hoping that I could have both Jodine Adams and the chief both here at the same time. So because the questions are often related and they work in tandem with each other, instead of going through having that formal procedure or process where I call one witness at a time, if we could just dispense with those formalities and I can ask them questions as they are relevant to each of them, would that be okay?
Fine with me. Is there any objection from the board? Any objection amongst the public?
All right, so if I could ask Chief Dupuis and Ms. Adams to come up. And again, just so that we can have a record preserved, perhaps, Mr. Chairman, you might wanna ask the witnesses if they are swearing or affirming to tell the truth in their testimony.
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes. Excellent, oh, thank you. So as we know, the reason we are here today is for this board to have sufficient information in front of it in order to determine whether or not, pursuant to your authority under both the town code and state law, whether the lodging license of Near Beach Motel is subject to suspension and revocation. And so the questions that I'll be asking and the documents we'll be discussing are all to that end. And I think, as I understood it, Mr. Chairman, that you'll be asking if you have questions throughout. It's somewhat informal that you'll be asking your questions of the witnesses as we go through their testimony. Is that correct?
Should we have them? Yes, I think that would be the appropriate format. It's just for clarification's purposes. We can always circle back.
Excellent. Okay. All right. So I think, without further ado, I'll just start right in. And as I said, the documents that I'll be referring to are up on the screen. And so I'll start with Code Enforcement Officer Ms. Adams. Are you familiar with the Near Beach Motel?
Yes, I am.
And can you just tell me roughly, just from a general perspective, how you are aware of that property?
Through complaints, through regular lodging inspections, and through basic calls there that we have.
Okay, and when you say complaints, again, I'm not getting into the specifics, but from a general perspective, can you tell us what kind of complaints that you've been fielding?
Health complaints, hot water complaints, smoke detector complaints.
Alright, so fair to say that this property has been subject to a number of notices of violation over the years?
Yes.
And so why don't we start, I'm gonna turn your attention to exhibit 3, which is, and I wanna go to page 107 of the materials, or 107. So if you wouldn't mind just identifying this document.
That is a notice of violation that we did on January 30th, 2021.
Just to clarify, I think it may be June.
June, I'm sorry.
Yep. And it was issued to 7 Shri Bhagwati Hospitality,
Yes,
and that is because that is the owner of 395 Post Road.
yes,
And my understanding is that your interactions have been largely with Mr. Patel,
yes,
and he's the, as we understand it, the principal of that entity that's named.
that was correct.
Okay. And have you also had communications regarding this property with anybody else, or has it been largely Mr. Patel?
Largely Mr. Patel, on occasion Mr. Patu, I believe his name is, he's the manager,
Like the property manager there?
Yes.
Okay, all right.
or at least he's the person there when we go there.
Okay, all right. And so just to orient us, generally speaking, it appears that the violations outlined here relate largely to electrical concerns and fire safety, is that fair to say?
Yes,
Okay, and if you could just give us a general overview of what those concerns were.
we had received a complaint that smoke detectors weren't working.
And when you say complaint, from a guest there perhaps?
I believe it was a guest,
Okay.
an anonymous call.
Mhm.
So we went out to the property and that caused us to do a inspection. And during that inspection, we found complaints, things that we need to look at further, electrical cords,
Mhm.
a lot of zip cords. We had ground fault indicators that did not work.
And that's in the outlets, is that right?
Yep.
Uh-huh.
Yep, near water sources, for instance, the bathroom sinks.
And those are all violations of the electrical code or concerns around?
Concerns, yes.
And I think there was something about a stovetop.
Right,
Talk about that.
stovetops, the stovetops were extremely old and we weren't quite sure whether they were actually working properly or not. And so we needed them to be looked at and verified that they were in proper working condition.
Okay, and I'm just gonna ask Chief Dupuy also with respect to the fire safety issues. And I should ask you, are you familiar with this property?
I am.
And how so?
We've been there several times for inspections, follow-up inspections, complaints, and medical calls.
Okay, so tell me if you would, I note here, if you could speak to the issues around fire safety. Can you talk about that, those concerns? And you physically attended the property in response as well?
That's correct.
Okay, so what did you note there that of concern?
There was multiple violations. We had lots of smoke detectors that were either inoperable, batteries missing, disconnected, or not even in the rooms at all.
Okay, and as a lodging facility, is there a requirement, as far as you know, that there be smoke detectors in each room?
Yes, there is. NFPA 101 is adopted by the state of Maine.
And what is that NFPA for those of us who don't know
NFPA
what
is the
that
National Fire Protection Association, has their own life safety code, which is called NFPA 101.
And so that's the life safety code most of us would know it by.
That's correct.
Okay, and so as you traditionally do, or I'm assuming is a tradition, that you have your violations listed, but then also you tell folks what is expected in order to correct them, correct?
Yes,
Okay, and so if you would, Jodine, if you would just tell us what the corrective action was that you had asked for?
one of the major things that we asked for during that process is an electrician. And Mr. Patel could not find an electrician in a timely manner. And so we had to look towards what would be the next solution, and the next solution in this case was to shut down the units that could not come into compliance with smoke detectors and a fire watch if he wanted to continue to stay open.
And ultimately, can you tell us what the choice was made there?
He chose to have fire watch until his electrician could become available.
Okay. And Chief, I'm just referring your attention to, this is page 341 of the materials. That looks like a report. Can you just tell us what that is?
Basically, this was a narrative that explained what had happened, that we had gotten called there to look at the life safety
And this
deficiencies.
is the event that we were talking about before.
That is
And when
correct,
you say narrative, I see here, it says the author is actually you, correct?
correct.
Okay, so walk us through that if you would.
So I was contacted by the codes to assist in a potential shutdown based on life safety deficiencies, specifically a lack of working smoke detectors throughout all the units. So we went through the building together, unit by unit to determine what were the deficiencies, and we noticed many rooms without smoke detectors. Either they were inoperable, non-existent, or maybe discarded or put off to the side.
Okay, and as, actually, you noted we, right?
Correct.
And who's the we here?
Several of my firefighters were with me and
Yep.
also the codes office.
Okay, and so I do notice that there are documents in these packets that are both from code and fire. Can you speak to why that is?
We work together on a lot of things. Some things are under her purview more so than myself. Other things are under my purview more than her. For example, she's got health and those types of things. I have fire safety and life safety issues.
Is it fair to say that that while you work together and inspect together, often the documentation of that or violation notices are usually issued by the code office?
That is usually the case,
Okay.
yes.
Fair enough. So you notice these things, particularly the issues around the fire, I should say smoke detectors. What happened?
Basically, we were able to determine that there were several detectors not working, several CO detectors that were inoperable or non-existent. So at that point, we wanted to try to do what we could to help, and we installed a few, but we basically realized that it was too much of an issue, and we needed them to actually redo all of them and install new smoke detectors throughout.
Okay, and was there any portion of the building that you found that had to be shut down at that time?
Yes, there was a small building that consisted of 2 units that had no detection, and basically because they were separate units, if a fire had occurred in one, while there was an occupant in another, it would endanger them, so because they were both that way, we felt that those 2 rooms could not be occupied.
Okay, so you shut down partially
Correct.
the motel, but you allowed to continue
Other areas,
under what, any particular conditions?
yes, so that we had to make sure that all the smoke detectors were gonna be in operation at some point, and that CO detectors would be reinstalled, and there were several other factors.
Okay, do you wanna address what those
I
factors
think
were?
there was an issue regarding storage, a storage facility or a laundry room that had no protection, fire rated walls, et cetera.
Okay, and the fire rated walls, why is that important?
Because a room that's unoccupied that has equipment such as dryers or furnaces or anything like that can create a dangerous environment, and if a fire were to break out, they need to have separation from the residential portion, or I should say the occupied portion, to prevent to slow the progress of fire down and gives opportunity for people to escape.
Okay,
Without a fire rated wall, the fire could easily breach those walls and endanger the occupants.
okay, so if I recall correctly, the notice of violation required them to have a electrician to come and sign off, and also that they have that fire
Separation,
correct. So
yes.
Jodine, could you speak to whether or not those things were done in a timely fashion?
They did bring an electrician in that did sign off on all of the items that we requested to be signed off upon. And we also did receive a building permit application for the uninhabitable area, the storage area to be permitted properly with fire ratings.
And has that been completed?
It has the first hour of sheetrock has been applied, and we have not received a call to do the second portion of that inspection yet.
Okay, so that was a notice of violation that was issued back in 2021?
Yes.
And so while it is somewhat complete, it's not entirely complete, is that
Correct.
correct? Okay, alright, so, alright, so I'm gonna direct your attention now to, page 111 or 12 of the materials. Can you identify that document for us?
That is a notice of violation that was based on a call that the fire department received.
And this is back in March.
March 24th,
Of this year?
2022, yes.
Yep. Okay, So, I'm sorry, I interrupted you. You got a call from the fire department?
Yes, that they had received a call regarding carbon monoxide detectors that were not working.
Mhm.
And they had not been addressed properly from management.
Okay. And any other issues that you saw as a result of that call?
We decided that we needed to do an inspection of the property to find out exactly what was going on.
And what did you find?
We found that there were many smoke detectors that weren't working. We found carbon monoxide detectors that weren't working. We found electrical issues again.
And I think it noted a concern around heating sources. Can you speak to that?
Right, so we saw monitor units in there or some type of heating apparatus, so we requested that the Evans HVAC person
Mhm.
sign off on that, verifying that they've been installed and maintained properly.
And can you speak to whether or not those things were done?
Yes, they were.
All right. I think in this notice of violation, it also talks about how there had been concerns from also the state health inspector on, and you itemized various dates of complaints in that regard. Can you go through those?
They have been there on several occasions.
They being
The state of Maine.
in what capacity?
They have gone on inspections based on mold, shower curtains that were dirty, the rooms not being cleaned properly, and they have gone out there several times in the last couple of years.
Okay. And I note here, it says, based on the complaint and report from the fire department and the lack of urgency from the motel management regarding potential life safety issues. Can you tell us a little bit more about what you meant about the lack of urgency?
The manager on premise did not feel the urgency to have the detectors or to actually go out there and find out what the issues were with the detectors and to have the batteries replaced immediately. From what I understand, he told the occupants to go back to bed and they'd address it later.
Okay, and actually, maybe I can have
Yes.
Chief Dupuy field this. I believe this may be, calling up,
March 24th?
correct. This looks like another, is it fair to say this is a report from your fire
Yes.
department?
Yes, that's correct.
And that you have, the author here is Matthew, is it
McGill.
McGill?
Correct.
So he attended, he's writing this report, but can you summarize essentially what was?
Basically, we got a call to the dispatch center. The dispatcher contacted us, let us know that there was an alarm activation at the near beach and that the occupant had called and had said they were concerned that their CO detector was going off and that they called management and management told them not to worry about it and just go back to bed.
And
So-
was that the only person that had complained to management as far as you
It
know?
was at the time until we got there.
Okay,
When we got there, we were able to find out that there were other units that had other people complained earlier
Mhm.
about the same thing and not to worry about the CO detectors.
and to unplug them?
And to just unplug them and not worry about them.
And as the fire chief, who you had mentioned that you have a working familiarity with the life safety code,
Yes.
is that something in your view that it's an appropriate response?
It is not an appropriate response
Why not?
because those are life safety devices. CO is a poison gas that can kill people instantly overnight. I mean, without any knowledge of any kind of an issue going on.
Right, Jodine, if you'll bear with me, scrolling through here. I believe we have another notice of violation dated April 22nd. Actually, no, this is not a notice of violation. Bear with me one sec, try to scroll here. Get in there we go. All right, I see another document. If you could identify this document for us.
This is a document letting the owner know that there would be a hearing regarding their lodging license with the
Okay,
Board of Selectmen.
So I know that this is dated in April 2022. Is April the month that lodging licenses are generally entertained?
Yes,
Okay, and how long have you been with the town?
18 years.
And do you generally attend these lodging license hearings?
Yes, I do, and we have not this type of,
Okay, and so generally in your, did you say 18
yes.
years? Have you been aware that there's been a public hearing on these lodging licenses?
We've never done a hearing like this before.
Okay, do they, can you just walk us through what the general procedure is in most cases?
Normally they are listed and the Board of Selectmen read them off and then they approve them.
Okay, all right, so in this case, it says that we're having a hearing And I note it says, because of continuing concerns regarding the safety of your facility and because the continued challenges public safety department experience with the long-term residents of the facility, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so flash forward, they had, I believe it was in June, is that according to your recollection, June of 2022, there was a hearing on the actual lodging license, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so I see a document here. If you could identify that for us, please.
This is July sixth, 2022, and it is the result of the public hearing.
Okay, and yeah, I think it notes there on June 21st, 2022, the following conditions of approval.
Yes.
Okay, so to summarize, this represents conditions of approval that were added to Near Beach's license, essentially, conditions of approval, correct?
Yes.
And do you have a recollection whether or not these were consented to, or if they were simply imposed?
They were consented to by the owner of the property.
Okay. And when you say the owner, we're talking about Mr. Patel in his capacity as a principal of that entity that we had identified as the
Yes.
property owner? Okay, and I'm directing your attention particularly to condition number 2 and condition number 5. So if you would just generally summarize what those conditions are.
The first condition is the occupants must register when they actually go to rent the room.
And so when you say register, it notes here a provision of the town code and also state statute that talks about requirements for occupants to register. And fair to say, when they come, when they go, they must keep an accurate record of those kinds of arrivals and departures.
Yes, when they surrender the room.
Okay. And also with respect to number 5 here, if you could just give us a summary of what that condition is, please.
This was the fact that the facility could not have long-term occupants. And it had long-term occupants and that needed to cease.
Okay, and is that in your understanding tied to anything? Was that just kind of a, hey, we don't want these to be residences, or is it tied to some kind of provision in the town code?
It's provided to the zoning ordinance
Okay,
that it's usually not to exceed 28 days.
okay, all right. And so, we're gonna get into this in more detail, but just from a general perspective, can you tell us your view as to whether or not the evidence that we're gonna be discussing establishes whether or not they were used as, I think it says, either by as accommodations for the traveling public or as residences?
Yes, there will be evidence.
Okay, and what is your general opinion as to whether or not they were used as residences or as accommodations for the traveling public?
They were used as residences.
Okay, and I'm not saying all of them, but
By
just,
majority.
okay. And also with respect to whether or not accurate guest registries were kept based on the evidence that we're about to talk about, can you just let us know what you think, whether or not that requirement was met?
It was not met.
Okay. So I'm gonna direct your attention to another document here. And I see your signature here, so if you could just give us an overview of what this document is.
In the past year, it was found that several of the motels were not using the facilities properly. Some of them needed to close a certain amount of time, length of stay, and so we were tasked with the project of finding exactly how hotels were approved and to write them a letter stating what they were approved for.
And so just to be clear, this was not just with respect to Nair Beach, this was sort of a overall project within the town?
I will be doing it to 67 units.
Okay, and you've already done it to more than just Nair Beach?
Half of them.
Okay, all
Over
right.
half, yeah.
So it sounds like a big project and you're steadily working your way through
Right.
it. Okay, and so this one was addressed to Nair Beach,
Yes.
I see here. And if you could identify here, and just to be clear, this is a form that you used that would look similar to any lodging facility, maybe the details as to how many rooms, the length of stay, but this form is generally what you would use for any lodging facility.
Yes, they were all the exact same items were answered on each one of them.
Excellent. Okay, so this length of occupancy, it says usually not to exceed 28 days, is that correct?
Yes.
And what do you base that on?
That is based on the time that it was approved
Okay,
or started business.
and that was an ordinance provision at that time?
Yes.
And I note here that it says if you disagree with any part of this review, that they should contact you, or if they have any questions that they should, or if they're interested in changing the opening and closure times, that they should contact you.
Yes, that's correct.
Anybody contact you from Nair Beach in this regard?
No.
Anybody disagree with this requirement here?
No.
Moving on. Again, another document, town letterhead, notice of violation signed by none other than,
Me.
yep, alright, so this is a fairly long document, but if you could just generally identify what it is, that would be great, and we'll walk through it.
This was dated. This was October 7th,
Okay,
and this is based on lodging records.
okay, so it's a notice of
Started.
violation and a notice of public hearing, which is giving notice of what we are essentially doing here today.
Correct.
Okay, and then, so I would submit to you that this goes through generally 3 themes. One here is that that Nair Beach violated various conditions of approval. Is that
Yes,
fair and accurate? And those conditions of approval are those that we identified earlier.
yes, they are.
Essentially, condition number 2, that they must file keep accurate lodging records, correct?
That is correct.
And the second condition of approval, that they not be using the rooms as residents, but rather they should be transient accommodations.
That is correct.
Okay, and you note here that the guest registries indicate that 14 rooms were registered as being occupied. However, upon door-to-door inspection, showed at least 30 rooms were actually being occupied.
That is correct.
Okay, and that second category of violations are violations of the town code, which in essence, is it fair to say, echo those conditions of approval, they're related. The town code talks about these occupancy and departure registries, and is that essentially akin to what we were talking about
Yes.
before? And that was what the condition of approval was based on?
Yes.
Okay, and similarly, we have the provision that talks about occupancy restrictions, that they shall not be occupied as a residence.
Correct, and those are not special conditions.
Those are not special conditions, meaning that those apply to any and all lodging
Yes,
facilities in the town of Wells?
yes,
Okay. And then there's a third category of violation that itemizes violations of the NFPA, correct?
yes.
Okay, so let's go through those if we can in a bit more detail. So, and I think also it indicates that staff members were on site on 9/19 and 9/28, correct?
Staff members from my office.
Correct.
Yes, a code enforcement officer was there.
And what was the purpose of that visit then?
That was to do an inspection with the fire department. And a police officer was also present.
Alright, so I'm going to forgive the scrolling, I'm gonna go to this record here. And if you could just identify for us what that record is.
That is from April until I believe the September 26th, 27th, I believe.
Okay, and that's the date span, but it says guest register discrepancies highlighted. So I'm looking at what is a fairly lengthy document here. It's page 1 of 96, or 94, excuse me. And is this record generated by the code office itself, or is it based on other data that you obtained elsewhere?
It was the data that we obtained from Mr. Patel.
Okay, so when you say obtained from Mr. Patel, you were, as I understand, you said part of the code office's job generally has been to look into lodging records and guest registries, correct?
Yes,
And you specifically requested from Mr. Patel his or the hotel's guest registries, correct?
yes.
Okay, and that this was essentially what was provided to you,
Essentially,
and that you have, when you say discrepancies highlighted, which we're going to be looking at, but you took their data and highlighted the discrepancies that you found in the data that was provided to you.
yes, it's over 5,000 lines of data.
Okay, so when you say 5,000 lines of data, we're talking about these lines here, correct?
Yes,
And so, just so everyone can understand what we're operating here with, these are the lines of data that we're talking about that comprise 94 pages of information, correct?
yes,
These seemingly random numbers. Do you have any sense of what those are?
I believe that is numbers that the hotel facility uses.
Okay, so they're registration numbers essentially.
Yes.
Yeah. Here is the date of the record, correct?
Yes.
Obviously, these are the names of the folks who were guests, correct?
Yes.
What's this big mass here of black?
That is that are emails and phone numbers which are not public information at this time.
Okay, so we've just redacted that to protect privacy. Then here's a description of the room type. Fair to say this is the room number?
Yes.
Okay, and then the rack rate or the cost of the room, correct?
Yes.
Okay, and so, as I'm scrolling, because it's gonna take a while to get there, but if you could just kind of talk about the process that your office went through when you were examining these records.
We took the names
Mhm.
or renditions of the names, since the names weren't always the same. They were sometimes spelt differently. They were sometimes close to the same name, but spelled they were a little bit different. So what we did is we took every one of those names and we sorted it in different manners to figure out who was who, where they were staying and what they were doing and when they were coming and going, if they were going at all.
Okay. And so it looks like in this very massive document, there's some yellow highlighting here. Is that fair to say that your office imposed that yellow highlighting?
Yes, we did.
Okay, and tell me if you would, what we're highlighting here. I'm looking at a record from 6/21. 1, 2, 3, 4 records from 6/21, correct?
Yes.
And we see various names here. Would you mind identifying for us what the discrepancy is from your perspective?
I believe those are the people that were sharing rooms.
When you say sharing rooms, I think you indicated that you went through and knocked
Yes.
on doors.
Yes.
Was the testimony of the folks that you spoke to that they were sharing rooms?
The testimony was they were not sharing rooms.
And yet here we have, it looks like, for example, we've got, excuse my eyes, kind
Yeah,
of,
what page are we on?
this would be page 183, I believe. Yeah, let me just make sure. 182. You all set? Good?
Yes,
Yeah,
thank you.
yeah, sure. So I see line 2283, right?
Mhm.
And we have a Kenneth Mulstay, correct?
Mhm.
In room 3
Yes.
on June 21st, correct?
Yes.
Also, you've got a William Ferrero, also in room 3 on the same day.
Yes.
Similarly, underneath that, you have a Chante Crejean in room 4, as well as a William Mouth in room 4 on the same date.
Yes.
Similarly, just walking down, and I'm not gonna belabor this but just to give examples, we have Janice Shaw, Catherine Wilkerson, and William Fuller, seemingly unrelated parties. Same date, June 21st, all occupying room 7, correct?
Yes.
And again, is that consistent with the testimony of the folks that you heard from about whether people are sharing rooms?
They were not sharing rooms, if that's what you're asking.
I was asking that. Similarly, same date, June 21st, you got 3 separate people, Joyce Nolan, Matt Zanowski, Zoe Farrell, on June 21st, all purported to be in room 36, correct?
Correct.
Okay, and so again, I will just submit to you that this is similarly highlighted throughout, correct? We don't
Yes.
need to, but it's similar examples of the same phenomenon here.
Yes.
Just another, June 23rd, it looks like 1, 2, 3, 4 people are all occupying room 14, all different names, unrelated. Okay.
Yes.
All right, and so as you were reviewing the records, you found similar discrepancies there.
Yes.
One of the things I note that not only does it show multiple individuals booked into the same room, but also shows them moving from room to room, the same person moving from room to room.
On the same day.
So can I just ask, as far as the testimony that you had received from guests, whether or not that was consistent with their testimony, whether guests did in fact move room to room, date on different dates?
Some did move on occasion to a different room, but not of the time frame that they're talking about here.
Okay, so let's just, again, just walk through. I'm gonna take randomly just an example here. Mr. Sarnaski, and I'm probably gonna mispronounce, but work with me here. So we have line 2303, right?
Yes.
June 21st, 2022. We'll call him Matt if we can.
Sure.
All right. So Matt is occupying on June 21st. He's occupying room 36, correct?
Yes.
So then if we go down to a few lines later, the next day, 6/22, the next day, Matt is now in room 7.
Yes.
Do you agree with me there? Let's see where he was. 3. Then we see on the very next day, June 23rd, Matt is now in room 38, which is different from the preceding 2 days.
That's correct.
Just carrying along. The next day, we see Matt that's June 24th. Next day, Matt is now in room number 1. Carrying along. Looks like, let's see. Here we are, line 2428, 6/25. The next day after that, he's now in a different room, room 31. And again, there are different examples of that throughout. I'm
Yes.
using this as an example. Fair to say that this is a fairly representative example of the data that you had found,
Yes.
and you found that to be somewhat puzzling because why?
Because they were moving around a lot of rooms on different days and still in the same facility, so why would you keep moving them around in different rooms?
And was that consistent with what the testimony was of the folks who were there that you spoke to?
They were not moving from room to room. They also weren't sharing the rooms that they were allegedly sharing in the log.
Okay. All right, directing your attention to exhibit 6, and again, I see data that looks somewhat similar to the previous exhibit. Fair to say that this data was essentially taken from the information given to you by Mr. Patel?
Yes.
And you note that this is it says peculiarities highlighted. So I'm gonna get to those peculiarities, but if you
Okay.
can just generally explain what this document represents.
This document represents the dates of when they registered, their names, their contact information, what rooms they had, what the cost was of those rooms.
And basically, again, all based on data that was provided to you by Mr. Patel.
Yes.
Okay. And so I see 2 areas highlighted here. We're not gonna belabor the point and go through, the 90-something page document, but here, let's just look at this. We have, looks like it spans just the dates from June 23rd and June 24th, correct?
Yes.
Same individual, Aubin, right?
Yep.
And here it shows Mr. Aubin on the 23rd of June, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, occupying 6 different rooms on the same day.
That's correct.
And similarly, the next day, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, he seems to be occupying yet 6 different rooms on the next day, correct?
That's correct.
And similarly, we have a Mr. Andrew Lapat. These represent days the 17th, 18th, and 19th of July, correct?
Yes.
And shows him occupying different rooms on different days. Excuse me, I should say the same rooms, room 20 and 21, both on the 17th.
Yes.
Also, both rooms 2021 on both the 18th and the 19th.
Yes.
And so fair to say that caused some confusion for you?
Yes, it did.
Has that confusion been resolved?
No.
And you included this narrative in the packet.
Yes.
In essence, have we gone through what your concerns were and this kind of identified what those discrepancies were in your mind, the discrepancies and the discrepancies and the peculiarities?
Yes.
Have we summarized them to your satisfaction?
Yes, we have.
Okay. All right, so going back to the notice of violation, because we talked about those 3 themes, correct? I want to actually ask, here, if I can just bear with me one sec. Here we are. Sorry, getting there. So talk to me while I'm getting there about the we talked about the discrepancies in the guest registry. But what about the occupancy restrictions that these were required only to be used as, for the traveling public rather than residences? That was one of the concerns that you identified in this notice of violation, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And so, in your view, and having spoken to folks at the premises, what is your general understanding of whether or not that was the case?
That is not the case.
Okay, and based on what?
Based on the interviews, come to find out there are 3 people that are actually workers that stay in some of the units and have been there more than 28 days.
Okay, so let me just direct your attention to this Exhibit 8, which is found at, I believe, page 322 or 321 of the materials. If you could tell us from a just general perspective what this document represents.
That shows the discrepancies.
Okay, so I note here, looks like mustard and ketchup to me here,
Yep.
but we've got, you have color codes, right?
Yes.
Tell me what the yellow represents.
The yellow represents the vacant rooms.
Okay, so those essentially are, they're just not occupied as far as you know.
Right.
And this was a snapshot as of the date that the door knocking.
Yes.
Okay, so September 28th, this is a snapshot of what was happening on that day.
Yes.
Okay, and so ostensibly that's just a representation of how things are conducted.
Yes.
All right, so, all right, we talked that yellow is vacant. Tell me what the orange represents.
The orange represents,
I'll read it for you and
Yeah.
you can tell me if it's
Okay.
accurate. Transient guests.
yes, those were actual people that were staying there or that were actually on vacation or using the facility as it's required.
And meaning for members of the traveling public.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then we have this sort of sea of red here, and I'll read that to you. It says 25 long-term guests.
Yes.
So math is not my forte, but I am looking, if you've got 25 plus 5, that's 30 rooms, correct?
Yes.
5 are being used in the manner in which they're intended. And it looks like this 25 of them are being used in long-term capacity.
Yes.
Okay, and so let's go to another document. Here's another spreadsheet. This is Exhibit 7 at page 321 of the materials. If you could, I should say 320, could you just give us a general idea of what this represents?
Those were people that were staying over the 28 days. That is a spreadsheet that we took based on the information that the owner of the facility gave us.
Again, this is all based on information that was provided to you.
Yes.
Okay, and so just from a general perspective, it looks like the data started in April, right? April
Yes.
1, and spans through, just looking through, it looks like through the end of September, correct?
Yes.
And so it shows that you have folks, various amounts of time. This is all folks who are staying over the 28-day rule, right?
Yes.
And just looking at this first block, it looks like, we've got people staying at least 4 months, correct?
Yes.
Then we have, I think you had mentioned that you also have some employees staying there.
Yes.
And it looks like, for example, the housekeeper is there for 3.5 months, correct?
Yes.
If I can read that. One of the employees was there for at least 8 months,
Yes.
and one was for 1.5 years, correct?
Yes.
And how did you come to that information? Because I see it looks like it starts in April. So how do you know that it was 1.5 years?
They were interviewed.
Okay, and they voluntarily
Yes.
gave this information, okay. And so, are there any residences that are approved on site as far as staff residences, dwellings,
No, they're not.
and it's just hotel units?
Hotel units, and they were staying in hotel units.
And can you tell us what the difference really is? What's the big deal? What's the difference between staying in a hotel unit and a dwelling unit?
A dwelling unit, they can stay there year round.
Mhm.
And a hotel unit, it's usually 28 days. And they were using those as dwelling units. And according to the zoning ordinance, they would need 20,000 square feet for each dwelling unit. And
I
they
see.
do not have that.
Okay, so those 3 that are being used as dwelling units for staff would have to actually have that extra density.
Yes.
And is that density on site?
No.
And does their site plan in any way show that there are staff accommodations or dwelling units on that plan that are approved?
No.
Okay. All right, so I am once again turning back to the notice of violation, and I'm going to ask Chief Dupuy to talk to me about this, because as you'll recall, the third theme was that there were violations of the NFPA. And while I'm scrolling there, could you just, if you do recall, can you talk to us about what the concerns were?
Which particular date was this?
We're on the October 7th notice of violation. And so it would be around that time, either in late September or early October.
Okay. There's just so many I'm trying to keep
I
up.
understand, so this is with respect to the notice of violation issued October 7th, 2022. And we are here now. So if this is the notice of violation we're talking about, and here it says upon inspection of the near beach pursuant to the authority under condition number 3, code office found that there were violations of NFPA 101, and specifically with respect to smoke alarms.
Yes.
So if you would speak to that.
So we found another series of smoke detectors either missing, removed, or not operational.
And can you give us a rough estimate of how many rooms that was?
I don't recall. I'm
It
trying to
notes
find
here, on the notice itself, it was 12. Does that sound consistent with
Yes.
your recollection?
That does.
Okay. And again, was this the first time that smoke detectors had been an issue?
No, this has been an ongoing issue.
Jody, and I'm just gonna bring it back to you. As we've talked about sort of general concerns and issues and notices of violation, but can you speak to whether or not there have been any, I would say cats and dogs, so to speak, that you're getting complaints about this facility? I'm going to go to page 354, this is exhibit 11, which is right here. I'm not sure if you can see that, but I see a Town of Wells Inspection Division Complaints Detail Report. Can you describe what this is?
I believe that's a hot water issue.
Okay, and just for everyone who may not be able to see it, looks like this is coming from July 28th, 2022, and it looks like a resident may have called, stated that there's no hot water.
Right.
If that jogs your memory, can you speak to that?
There was an issue with the person not having hot water. They called, we looked into it, and apparently there was a new washing machine hookup being done or a changeover. And so the person was not having hot water, and when it was brought to management's attention, they were reminded that they had forgotten and took care of it.
Okay, is this the first time you've heard about hot water complaints?
No, we've had hot water complaints off and on at the facility. That's what prompted me to ask for the HVAC maintenance to be done.
Okay, any other sort of generalized complaints that you field anytime since that time, since July of 2022?
Yes, we received another one 2 weeks ago of hot water, which rectified itself after a call was made. And then we received a call last Wednesday or Thursday, I believe.
And what was that about?
The toilet wasn't working and hadn't been working.
Okay.
And a call was made, and that person was moved to a different unit.
Okay. We have another exhibit here. This is exhibit 2, and it looks like it is from Chief Dupuy to you, September 26th. If you can just identify what that is.
That is an email that I received from the chief.
Do you recall what prompted it?
It was based on a conversation he had with a WEMS person about the condition that they found when they went on an emergency call.
Okay, and I'm gonna turn this over to the chief because it looks like it was from him, so he's best able to speak to it.
Yes.
So Chief, it said they found a woman living in squalor. If you could you speak to that, please?
Yes, on the date that I sent that, I don't know the date offhand, but
I'll just refresh your recollection. It's September 26th, 2022?
so on that morning, I had one of the WEMS employees come to the fire station, asked to see me, came upstairs.
Did you summon that person or they came to you? This
No, I
was,
had no idea he was
Okay.
coming, he just asked us to meet with me.
Mhm.
Came upstairs, we met, he sat down in my office, He showed me pictures on his cell phone and explained that he went to a medical call.
And when you're talking, if I could just, are these
Yes.
the photographs?
Those are the photographs.
Okay, so if you could, I'm just gonna scroll between them, if you could describe those while I'm scrolling?
Yeah, so the first one was the bed, which was stained, heavily stained with fecal matter and other bodily fluids. And the other picture showed evidence of fecal matter all over the floor, to the extent that I was informed by the EMS, the EMT that was there, that they had to put several blankets down and towels down to walk on because they were slipping all over the place.
Okay.
And it was unsanitary for them to be working on the patient.
Understood, okay, and so I'm gonna ask you, Jodine, back to you. In addition to being a code enforcement officer, are you also wear any other hats in the town?
The health officer?
Okay, and so as a result of being the health officer, did you have any particular concerns about this?
Yes, I did.
Can you describe them?
That is a hazardous material issue
Mhm.
and needs to be cleaned by a person that is licensed and certified to clean up hazardous material using the proper personal protection equipment
For the people who are cleaning,
for the people that are cleaning and
Okay.
also for it to be disposed of.
it being the materials that are found on.
Yes,
Okay, and so at that point, did you reach out to the ownership of the hotel to express those concerns?
I did.
Can you describe what you had asked for?
I had sent an email requesting that he should most probably get a company that would do those services for him.
And when you say he, again,
Mr.
Mr.
Patel.
Patel.
And then I sent him another email saying that was not an option.
You sent him another email saying what was not an option.
He had to,
Okay, so, and you changed your mind because it became apparent to you.
that it was a serious issue and I did not want it to just be cleaned and for the next person staying in the unit to us not knowing exactly what happened there
Okay.
for a coli or any other health issue to arise and also for the employees that he may want to clean the room to be exposed.
Okay, so you made it clear that you had an expectation both for the safety of his staff and also for members of the public that be cleaned properly. When I say properly, not to say that others wouldn't be diligent in their efforts, but by a trained entity that knows how to deal with hazardous materials.
Yes.
Okay, so take me from there. Was it, according to your understanding, was this room cleaned at the outset by ServPro? I think ServPro is the entity that you recommended
Yes,
or referred them to as one of the
yes,
options.
that's one of the options.
Yeah. And was it initially cleaned by ServPro according to your understanding?
No, it was not.
Can you walk us through what happened then?
It was cleaned by the employees. And so we posted it against occupancy.
And what does that mean for us?
We posted that people could not be using the unit until the issue was rectified.
Yeah.
And
And when you say issue is rectified, what does that mean in your view?
cleaned properly and we received certification that it was cleaned properly.
Okay, so this incident happened on or around September 26th, is that correct?
Yes.
And according to your understanding, when was it cleaned by ServPro?
We contacted ServPro today and they cleaned it on 10/19.
Okay, so that clearly there's some time, 2 or 3 weeks that in the intervening period, there's quite a bit of time before that was actually cleaned, is that correct?
24 days.
Did you reach out to, did Mr. Patel or any representative of Nair Beach reach out to you to tell you that it had in fact been cleaned?
No,
And what kinds of efforts did you make to ascertain whether it had been cleaned?
we were working with ServPro to find out what was going on and ServPro was having a hard time getting the contract signed.
By Nair Beach?
Mhm.
Alright. I think those are my questions. Obviously, if the board has any, that would be wonderful, and I know that Mr. Orso has an opportunity to ask questions as well.
Any questions from the board?
Let me just ask, what's the current status? Do you have any idea what the current status is of the things that were, all the things that were in non-compliance, have they been corrected?
We have not been back out to the property.
But a follow-up question, has anybody come into contact with you to address whether or not they are in fact in compliance?
No. No.
Oh, one other question.
Okay, Kathy.
Was it their responsibility to contact you to tell you that they were in compliance?
Yes,
Okay, so they have not done that. Did you give them a time frame?
I did not, just that the room could not be occupied.
Okay.
We're extremely busy
Yeah.
and we just do not have the time to be a babysitting service.
Thank you.
We've spent a lot of time on this property.
And I will say, Jodine, let me ask you this, back to that notice of violation on the 7th. It was to itemize the concerns that were existing concerns with the registry, correct?
Correct,
And they dealt with historical concerns, correct?
correct.
And can you fix things that happened, this is about reviewing the lodging register as it existed, correct?
Correct. We went and inspected lodging records and we had not received the lodging records. So I asked my staff to email again and ask where the lodging records were. In the meantime, we received a complaint from the chief and then it kind of tunneled from there. And we went back out and found smoke detectors again. And that is what has prompted where we are today, along with the lodging records.
And can I just ask a question? Those lodging records, as I understand it, spanned from April 1st through end of September, correct?
Yes, at first we asked for 60 days and then we moved it up to 90 because the records were so bad. We asked for 90 days to get a better snapshot of what was going on. And people stayed in one room. People stayed in a room, 6 rooms in one day. The person that you saw in that particular unit had not been in there since August. They were not registered since August 31st. So nobody knew they were in that room if something bad had happened.
I did wanna ask that question, so we understand that there are lots of records here and administrative records are important. But is it simply about paperwork? And I would ask both of you to address that question.
No, it's not about paperwork.
What is it about?
It's about if something very bad happens, we've got our people, our firefighters and our police officers going in there. And they're putting their life at risk and somebody may be in that unit, somebody may not be in that unit, they don't know.
So that's the importance of accurate records in your view?
Yes, and unfortunately, God forbid if somebody does pass away, we'll have no idea who they are and how to contact family, or if we're contacting the right family for the right person.
And Chief, is that similar? Do you have similar?
Absolutely, that last statement is probably the biggest factor of all. It's not like we're gonna run through a registry when we go to a building fire there. However, we're gonna just go into every building and try to find someone, but if someone were to be killed in a fire or smoke related issue or a CO related issue, we may not be able to identify that individual. And we may not, especially if somebody is unidentifiable, we would have extreme difficulty, if at all impossible, to identify the body.
Understood. Thank you.
Go ahead.
I wanted to ask you a question. Every time you go, there are fire detectors that are unplugged, not working, missing, and then they all get fixed. So most of the time you put a smoke detector in and you just replace the battery every year. Where do they go? What happens? How?
Lots of times they'll take the batteries out because we're making assumptions, but we're assuming that people are either smoking in the rooms and don't want them going off, so they take the batteries out, or maybe they can't get them open, so they'll just remove the entire detector and take it outside. Maybe they'll throw it away.
Are there cooking facilities in there?
There are several that have
Could
cooking
that
facilities,
trigger
and that
also?
could also be anybody who's just cooking and maybe not a good cook is gonna be causing some CO issues or smoke issues.
Thank you.
As a commercial lodging facility, is the near beach subject to code and life safety regulations for the time that it was built, or are they required to abide by current requirements?
It's a very difficult to answer, but it's mostly current because the life safety code has 2 portions to that. Every chapter has 2 parts. It is existing and new. And there are 2 different regulations for each one, so new is a little bit stricter, but the existing portion of that chapter also addresses, and it must be kept up to 2018 life safety code.
Have we inspected the facility to compare it versus current regulations?
Could you ask that again? I'm sorry.
Have we inspected the entire facility to compare what is on the ground versus what is required by current?
Yes.
We have.
Yes, we did that we started doing that back in, it's been done prior to my being here in 2019. But we've done it starting sorry, just got a reminder. In 2021, when we started the July fire watch, we did an entire soup to nuts inspection that day, and we've been continually going there to do those inspections on a route, a random, because we were allowed to by license, and based on complaints.
Does that include code requirements?
Yes.
Does the facility abide by current code or past code?
So it really depends, for instance, that's why we have a licensed electrician sign off on it based on their license. So it may not be the most up-to-date electrical, but it is safe, and there are
And Jody,
portions
just-
of that code.
Just to make clear, does the town inspect or regulate electrical?
No, it does not.
Okay. And that's why you asked a master electrician to weigh in on that?
Yes, and master HVAC personnel.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the board at this time for clarification purposes? Attorney Rayson, are you?
Yeah, I think now Attorney Orso has an opportunity to either ask
Yes.
questions of these witnesses or make his own presentation.
Can I sit down?
Yes,
over here just so I can
absolutely.
spread out?
Please.
It's
Yeah,
just a little
please.
difficult on that.
Come up and join us. It's
Yeah.
time for the, we'll give time now to the representative from the Near Beach, Attorney Orso.
Thank you very much. Greg Orso for Near Beach, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you again tonight. Let me start, generally, you mind if I sit?
No, go ahead.
Stand?
Please do.
Let me start with some, a few general comments and then, I'll go specifically through and then I have some questions for the town officials. This, I guess, I would start with saying that it's a very difficult process. And let me, explain why. Under the statute, which we're all governed by, under Title 30A, 3814, it talks about hearings relating to suspensions or revocations of licenses, okay? And what it says is that a license may not be revoked or suspended under this section until after investigation and hearing, that's what we're doing. At the hearing, the licensee must be given an opportunity to hear the evidence in support of the charge, which we've heard some of, against the licensee, and to cross-examine alone or through counsel the witnesses. Now, we have two witnesses here, where people identified as witnesses, but they're not really witnesses. Now, with one exception, the chief was there for one event. The rest of all the information we're getting is compiled by Miss Adams, who I'm not saying is dishonest, I've known her a long time, I'm not saying that at all, she's making it up, I don't believe that. But it's not cross-examining witnesses, because you heard through her testimony a half a dozen times or more that I was told by, that I heard, yes, the general sentiment was. Well, we're talking about revoking my client's license. I don't get to hear the witness, I don't get the same benefit the town had, which is talk to the person right in front of you and ask them questions as the town did. I'm not getting that benefit, because they're not here to testify. And that's what's meant by witnesses here. It's not the town officials and basing all their information on what they were told. And I'll point out why that's critical in a few minutes, but the reality is, I object to that testimony that's based upon anything other than specific firsthand knowledge. And as I said, the chief was there for one event. I object to a couple instances where a report was brought up that he didn't write, and then he relays an incident with the EMT with regard to that unfortunate situation with that elderly woman. But beyond that, he was there for some of the inspections of the units. But when we're talking about something as critical as a fundamental due process property right, I'm not allowed to go into court and have a private investigator show up and tell me all the things that these people were doing. What has to happen is those people have to be there to tell me what they were doing. And that's the difficulty with this, particularly when, we made reference to all the documents before, 354 pages we got at 4 o'clock on Thursday. Now, I don't know what for purposes of this, we're having a hearing on Monday on this. There's a lot of information there, as you probably ruined all your weekends, and I understand that. But when we're talking about fundamental property rights like licensure, the statute talks about I understand the rules of evidence don't apply, and Attorney Rashin's right about that, there's no rules of evidence that apply. However, fundamental rights to confront the witnesses still applies. And that, this person, my client, doesn't have any opportunity to do that. So that's the initial concern. The second concern is, we have a notice of violation here, and it was brought up a little bit at the end by Attorney Rashin, that talks about, okay, well, typically a notice of violation, all the other notices of violation were talking about things that there are problems that you could fix. Well, the notice of violation process is for that purpose. It's to give this person an opportunity to fix the problem and then fix it. There is no opportunity to fix the problem here, because they said it's all historical. I don't know how that vitiates the protections in the notice of violation process. Oh, sure, they're historical. But we're talking about some of these issues we've talked about before, no question. And I'll explain a little bit about that, but you still have a notice of violation. My client has a right to be able to fix a problem before it is, his license is suspended. This board takes that drastic step and suspends or revokes a license. And my client doesn't have the opportunity here to do that simply because it's not in the notice of violation and it's identified as a historical notice. The two primary issues, well, I'll say three issues, but the primary issues here are the logbook, number one. Number two is the same issue we have with the tenants still being there, that are in the process of being removed. And then we have what I identified as, I'm not saying they're not important, but sort of miscellaneous issues with regard to the fire detectors and this unfortunate situation with this elderly woman. And then there were a couple of hot water complaints. Starting with the an issue that I was here before with this board, with regard to the tenants. And again, and maybe I wasn't clear the last time, but just so we get a little bit of context for that. There is no legal way to move these people out other than what we have done since it was first brought to our attention. There are a couple lawyers in the room, they would understand that when you have a process like this, just because they've had experience with it, not you have to be a lawyer to understand it, but just because they've had experience with it. Number one, since COVID hit, from I believe it was March 13th, 2020, until the end, until the Supreme Court knocked down that prohibition in October of 2021, there were no evictions allowed federally. Across every state in this union, we weren't allowed to evict. So 17 months, right there. So anybody that you say, well, they've been in there 17 months. Well, 17 months, nobody could evict at all. Then you have the states, it was left to the states to start doing evictions. Well, when did the state of Maine start evictions? January of 22. They started evictions. Who got priority? People that had filed in the last 18, 20 months. So you have a process whereby we had to serve, once this decision by Judge, which we talked about last time too, Judge Douglas came down and said, all these people that have been in these hotels, they're tenants. Tenants, landlord tenants, they have tenancies. They are not your typical people that are staying in your transient accommodations. They are tenants, and what the difficulty with that was that what that means is none of them have leases, obviously, because they weren't intending to be there for that period of time. You couldn't evict them for 18 months, and then the state of Maine didn't allow you to evict them for another several months. So they're all tenants. Judge Douglas says in York County, all these people are tenants. Okay, well, what does that mean? Well, what you have to do then, and this is a decision, Mason versus Blue Diamond Management, May 23rd, 2022. Pine Tree Legal represents the plaintiffs there, and they were able to get a temporary restraining order saying you can't just kick these people out, you have to go through the eviction process.
Greg, can I just ask, is that the law court case that Pine Tree was citing for that proposition?
Yes.
Thanks.
So then, oh no, this is the result of the law court case.
No, I understand.
Yeah, this is the Superior Court case.
Gotcha.
Yep. So, so then what happens is you have to serve them with a 7 or 30-day notice. Or both. Well, and what ended up happening was we ended up serving all of the people that we've been able to serve with both a 7 and a 30-day notice for the reason that there are some instances where you can get somebody out after 7 days and start the eviction process then. As it turned out, that didn't work out real well, but we still had a 30-day notice attached to it. So you serve somebody with a 30-day notice, it has to go the full 30 days. And then you contact the court and you are allowed to get a date to have them evicted. So the process is you serve them the notice. After the notice is done, they have 7 more days. You can get a court date anytime after that 7 days. As long as you get the court date, you appear. They have 9 more days after that to get out once you get a judgment. Well, here's the problem. We served, I think it was, and we provided the list of the town, and it's part of the exhibits. We served, I think, about a dozen people as the first day we could. And the state of Maine court system, because they had been so backed up with evictions, they would not allow anyone to set up a court date until after that notice expired, with the hope that some people would leave and then you wouldn't need as many court dates. So we did that. We served everybody on or about June 8th, 2022. And the reason for that was the month started, we have to wait 7 days that they're late on that monthly rent. Well, they weren't paying rent anyway, but they're late on that monthly rent. So we served them on June 8th. After that 30 days was up, we called July 8th to get the date. It was July 9th. The first date that was available, September 22nd. And we were allowed actually 6 that time. We were never allowed 6 again. We were allowed 6. We had many more than that the notice expired, but we're only allowed 6 that time. We have to do them out of York District Court. That's the only district court that's doing them. They do evictions twice a month. So, but we're not allowed to take up all the dates. You know, it's in the old days, years ago when I used to do them, we're like, okay, there are 20 spots, take all 20. They don't do that anymore. So after that, we're only allowed 5. Was there other people trying to do this too, obviously? So I've been to court twice a month for the last 3 months, trying to get people out, last 2 months, September, October, trying to get people out. We have 2 more dates in November. And then you work out arrangements. Pine Tree Legal provides their services to all the tenants. You work out arrangements with them, or you have hearings, and you get judgments, and they're all being evicted. There hasn't been one person that we have gotten that step with that hasn't had a judgment entered against them for purposes of eviction. Okay, so that is every single person that we've been mandated to get out, we've got a judgment of eviction against them, or they left already and we withdrew the judgment of eviction, so they don't have it on the record. So, and we still have half a dozen to go. But that whole process there is one that there is no other legal way to do that. I wish there was, but there is no other legal way to do that. We still have a number of people left, but as you go through it, every time we serve the 30-day notice and the 7-day notice combined, we have to wait for that to expire before we get a court date. Once we have the court date, they tell us when. But all of these court dates, September, October, November, we've had those since July, August, and June, July, and August. So it's months out to get the actual court date, and you can't do anything under the state of Maine residential landlord tenancy law without doing that. So you have to go through that process. And as I said, we have, as part of this, provided the town with the tenants and 3, 6, 7, 11, 17, 22, we've already dealt with, and we have 3 more on 11/18. Now, you're gonna see there are some, for example, you'll see on here, the case was continued over objection. I mean, we get there, the person's not there, I ask for a default judgment. Person's not there. Somebody occasionally gets up, speaks, says, well, that person's my neighbor and that person's sick or that person's ill or there's some other problem that they have getting to court. And I said, Judge, I still want a default. The judge says, sorry. And they don't always do that. I'm not saying the judge is unfair. They don't always do that. But when you see that on there, the continuation, it was not something that that benefits a landlord under any circumstances to continue these cases out. So we have the vacation dates and when these people were going forward, and we have another 3 hearings on 11/18. The difficulty also is, and this is occasionally rears its head during that process, is it is not always easy to get service. And, what ends up happening is because of that, we get the sheriffs to do just about all the service, as much service as we can. They're required to serve eviction summonses. They're not required to serve notices to quit. But I think as a practice, it's just easier to do that, so that they can follow up on it and move the people forward. Now, let me just, I'm just gonna go from the documents that we have here. Yes, sir.
For you leave that subject.
Oh, yeah,
and ask
absolutely,
a
yes, sir.
question. You talked about, back when COVID started, the federal law said you couldn't evict people.
That's correct.
Does that apply to motels as well as
Yes.
apartments?
Yep.
Is that in,
Yes.
is that in the federal
It was,
language?
we were told, and again, I did read the federal law, but I can't tell you that I understand it fully. But we were told that the courts were not doing any evictions for any commercial, residential, nothing for that period of time. They ended up doing, I believe, the district court did one commercial eviction in that 17-month period. And I think it might still be on appeal, but that was the concern. There were no evictions that were being allowed to be for anybody staying in a place, including hotels. Was not permitted.
Thank you.
So let me go through with some questions I have for Ms. Adams relating to some of the exhibits we have here. And I'm going to let me just start with the notice of violation. And so, Ms. Adams, the first notice of violation under Exhibit 3 is the June 30th, 2021 notice of violation. And let me see if I can get you a page here just to make it easier.
Great, I can bring it up on the screen if you get me a page.
Yeah, that'd be great. I'll get you, thank you. Page 107.
Doesn't look like it. Sorry, what was the date?
6/30/21. Thank you. And ma'am, you remember this notice of violation?
Yes.
Okay. And this notice of violation had some electrical fire safety issues. And you, as part of this was written by someone in your office, but you're familiar with the notice of violation?
Yes, that's actually on the property.
You run the property yourself?
It's a-
Okay. And why does somebody else write in the office? It's just a matter of convenience?
That person was also on the property,
Is it required that they be on the property to write it?
not necessarily, no, because the notes give the complete story.
The notes, and typically you get notes from the file or somebody else's notes?
Correct.
All right. So this one was written by Irish Griffith, is that correct?
That's correct.
And identifies the requirements and what this business has to do to correct it. Is that true?
That's correct.
That was corrected?
Are we talking about every single little thing?
Well, it was, let me ask that. So there's a notice of violation provided, and it provides the, what you have to do to correct it. If it's not corrected, what happens?
We move forward to find out why it's not corrected, what the reasons are, and whether we can work with them or not based on what the item is.
Okay, so after this notice of violation, were the corrections made?
The corrections were made.
Okay. The second notice of violation, March 24, 2022, which is on page 111. This one dealt with fire safety detectors And one of the reports that I talked about before that the chief made reference to, that he wasn't a part of, but he made reference to. Is that correct? This is dealing primarily with fire safety?
You asking me or her?
I'm sorry, I'm asking Ms. Adams.
Yes, mostly fire safety, yeah.
And this was one of the times that we heard statements made that you were told that, or somebody told you that that person was told by the manager of the building that they should just unplug them and not worry about it, they'll deal with it in the morning.
That is correct.
Who told you that?
That is the initial call that I got from the fire department.
So, okay, so let's be clear then. Somebody at the fire department got a call from somebody at the building.
I believe it started with dispatch and they interviewed people from there.
Okay, so dispatch got a call from somebody at the building presumably, correct?
Yes,
Okay. You were then called by somebody at the fire department
yes,
who relayed the message from somebody at the building through dispatch?
I assume that's how it happened, yes.
Okay. And who was that person that made the initial call, do you know?
I do not remember.
Did you ever talk to that person?
I believe I spoke with the chief.
But he wasn't the one that called, made the initial call.
May I interject? So this was a fire report that was made by firefighter Matt McGill, who in his report states directly that he spoke to people and those people told him these items. So that is firsthand information for him. Obviously, he's not here today.
Well, who's the person that he spoke to?
We don't put names like that in here we just talk about the resident in the particular unit on that particular date. So you could probably find that out based on the documentation that you have for that date.
Chief, I don't have any doubt that you would believe what somebody in your department told you. You're the chief, why would they lie to you about that, correct?
Sure.
But you could understand why, when this is fourth hand now, this is information that I'm asked to cross-examine somebody who called your department,
Mhm.
who then your department called the code office. Then the code office put it down in a report, and now the code office is reporting it as fact. You
Yes.
can understand why I might be skeptical of that.
No.
You can't understand
Only
that.
because these are legal documents and that all the firefighters and myself, we all are sworn to an oath. Could they lie? Sure, I guess that's possible. But like you said, why would they? And we're sworn to these duties.
So, but it's not only relying upon your officer, though.
Correct,
You're relying upon this person,
correct.
and are you gonna put your reputation on the line for saying that person's not lying?
No, what I'll
Okay.
put my reputation on the line is that they're just documenting what was told to them.
No question.
Okay.
And I'm not asking you to say it was, I come from a long line of policemen. I understand how that works, and I don't have any doubt that your guy heard what he said.
Yep.
And told you.
Absolutely.
And then you told Jodine what he told you.
Yep.
It wasn't that telephone game didn't break down there.
Correct.
But there's no one here that told you, your officer, that, correct?
No, that's correct.
Okay. And you certainly wouldn't swear under oath that that was true, what that person said.
No, there's no way possible for me to do that.
All right. Ms. Adams, this notice of violation, in order to correct, was then resolved, is that correct? That was corrected?
Yes, it was.
Okay. We then have the next document I want to bring your attention to. And this one is on page 134. And this is the September 1st, 2022 letter. And this is a letter that you were asked about on direct examination by Attorney Rasham. And this letter was sent to whom?
That was sent to That was sent to the Near Beach Motel.
Is there anything on this would tell me that?
It was registered mail, and I did not bring that portion with me, but it was sent registered mail. And it will
Okay.
say exactly who it was. As you
Alright.
can see up in the corner, it's certified and regular mail.
Sure. That's not part of the evidence you're presenting though, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So now this has, the code enforcement officer finds the following approval for your facility and has the business, name, has the address, the map and lot. Last site plan approval, no site plan on file. That's what that says?
That is correct.
So there is no site plan on file in the town of Wells relating to this property?
That we can find at this time, that is correct.
Okay. So site plan approvals have an impact on the usage of a particular property, is that correct?
Yes,
In fact, that's the original governing document on what can be done on this property.
not necessarily.
What typically is the original governing document then?
If they do not have a site plan, then we look at the ordinances of the town.
Need to take care of that?
At the end of the day, they're the property owner, yes.
At the end of the day, and I didn't hear what you said?
At the end of the day, that is the property owner, yes.
So they're required to, again, what, they have to go over and take out the dog 3 times a day?
It does not matter how it gets rectified, the town of Wells cannot require that the tenant take care of it, it is the property owner's responsibility.
To take care of any tenancy?
I'm just gonna object, the question has been asked several times,
Well-
and you've had an answer to the question.
This is the first time she answered it. So, well, let me just, see if I can elaborate on that. Where in the town code does that tell us that the tenant, the landlord's responsible for the sanitary conditions of the tenant's living quarters?
It is the town, it is the responsibility of the property owner. That is the ultimate responsibility of the property.
Well, I get that part, but if they're renting out the property, the tenant is not responsible at all for that, circumstance.
We notify both and they have to get it rectified. It does not matter who takes care of it, it needs to be rectified.
Well, that's a little bit different. So what you're saying is that it's the landlord and the tenant's responsibility.
In most cases, yes.
Now, the, Exhibit 10. Let's see if I can locate Exhibit 10.
Right, or so I'm gonna
Yes.
just interject briefly. We have to give this room up at 6:30, so it may be wise to discuss a continuation. I don't think we're gonna make it through this proceeding even close by that time, given the constraints, so what would the pleasure of the board be on that one, opinions?
Do we have a time when we can continue it?
We didn't expect that, so we haven't looked at it.
Okay.
It's up to you.
You wanna see where we are at 25 after, cause that doesn't take long to do that.
We can do that. I would just like to be to a point where we're clean. Now, if that's Attorney Orso's finished up his first round and then we wait and reschedule for the rebuttal and.
If I just have 5 more minutes, I'll be done.
Okay, that sounds good. Thank
And then
you,
we
Attorney.
and we'll appear whenever you tell us to, thank you. So I'll keep it to 5. Never heard that from a lawyer before. Okay, so Exhibit 10. It's,
320.
yeah, 323, yeah. I think it starts at 323. So Exhibit 10, Ms. Adams, is identified as a building permit
Yes,
with accompanying documents. And this was a building permit for what?
to do the alterations to fire rate the storage area.
And this was something where you made reference to the fact that this project started but has not been completed?
We have not received the final, we have not been requested for the final inspection. I have not, I don't know if it's been completed or not.
Okay.
They just haven't called us for the final inspection.
And is that the one remaining step for that project?
Yes,
And that was a result of one of the previous notice of violation.
Yes,
All of the inspections up to then have been satisfactory.
for a period of time,
I didn't,
for a period of time, some of them become violations again.
for a period of time, it doesn't go on forever.
No,
And there hasn't been any other notice of violation issued on that, nor any action taken by the town on that project, is that correct?
no,
I'll ask you a better question. Am I right in
Yes.
saying yes? Okay. Now, this exhibit 2, which is talking about that unfortunate situation with that elderly woman, has an email chain going back and forth between Mr. Patel, Miss Griffith, and yourself, is that correct?
yes,
And I had some difficulties following that. Because the times didn't match up to your timeline.
because he was in India and when he responded,
So Paul was in India,
yes.
and what's the difference in time there, do you know?
And when
Okay,
it was-
well, that would help
yeah.
me, you know,
12 hours or something like
It's
that.
9 hours 30 minutes.
what,
And it's the daylight saving 9 hour 30 minutes or it's 10 hour 30 minutes.
oh, I never heard that, never knew there was a 30 minutes in that one either. Okay, great, I mean, part of it was being concerned that you were in a meeting at a
About that, do we wanna work on setting times tonight, or we wanna deliberate that at tomorrow night's meeting, how do we wanna go about that?
You could deliberate it tomorrow night if you give me a chance to look at the calendar. I would think that you'd make an attempt to conduct a public hearing, to hear from the public while they're here.
And may I just, Mr. Chairman, I do have a couple of reexamination questions. I understand that, you know, I will keep it brief and succinct, but I think there are some issues that came up that I'd like to redirect some questions to. And some legal issues have come up, but I believe that that would be part of any summation that we make, which would happen later. But while it's still fresh in your mind, I know we have the room until 6:30. If I could just ask those redirect questions at
Yep,
this point?
so how about this, I'll propose this. We will hear the direct questions until 6:15. We will have the public comment period from 6:15 to 6:30. Tomorrow evening, we will set an agenda item if we can, if that's legally within our rights. And we will discuss rescheduling this at that point and work on going through that
Right.
act of Congress again, so.
Just a question to our attorney. If we continue the public hearing, we don't need to make another notice,
Not another notice, but you should make a motion to continue the public hearing.
but we don't need to wait the 10 days or?
No.
Okay, thank you.
And sorry, Mr. Chairman, because I hear that the public hearing will be continued, if I can't make it through by 6:15, I think it's really important that I redirect these questions, that at the later date, that the public portion of the hearing can be continued as well. I'm gonna be as brief as I can,
Yep,
but
I know, I understand, I
Okay.
just, and just, does this work for everybody as far as discussing resetting the date tomorrow night and then working until 6:30 tonight on hearing the
Yeah.
concerns, does that work? Any objection to that?
No.
Okay,
and this will be a little all over the place just because I'm responding to things that have come up. So I will reserve any comments on the legal arguments until afterwards, cause I think that both parties will have
Yeah.
a wrap up,
I'm
right?
gonna go back to my seat.
Sure, okay,
Annoying anybody.
so
Thank you.
I'm gonna have questions for both of you, just redirecting it in no particular order, just based on questions that Attorney Orso has asked you. First, I think both of you, and I'll actually direct this to Chief Dupuy first. There were Attorney Orso was asking you about questions about hearsay and this, and that you didn't have firsthand knowledge, it was secondhand or what have you.
Correct.
The records that we've been looking at, those various complaints and narratives, right? That
Yes.
either there were some reports from you that you were the author of the narrative, or some of your firefighters were, correct?
Yes.
Are those records kept in the ordinary course of business? In the sense of, are these, if there is a complaint, or if there's a call, is it the ordinary practice in the practice of the fire department to keep these
Yes.
records?
Correct,
Do you keep
yes.
those records, and when I say contemporaneously, meaning, are those within a day or two of the actual event?
Yes,
Okay, and so those, these records that have been examined today,
yes,
and that is subject of these proceedings, they're not unusual.
no,
That is something that your firefighters are expected to do in the usual course of business.
that is correct.
Jodine, there were questions from Attorney Orso, I guess he's not here at the moment, about whether or not in each instance, those notices of violation, the things that were itemized as things that must be corrected, he asked you whether they've been corrected, correct?
Yes,
And I think your response, and again, please correct me if I'm wrong, is that but for this building permit where there's still some outstanding work to be done, that largely those things have been corrected. Is that a fair summary of your testimony?
they are corrected. No, it's not.
Okay, so let me rephrase. He had asked, went through each of those notices of violation. There was corrective action suggested by the code office.
Yes,
And then he asked you if they've been, at this point, if they have been corrected.
they become corrected and then they become violations again.
Okay, so what I'm hearing, the tide goes in and out
Yes,
essentially.
That
Okay.
is correct.
And while I think it was your testimony that they have been corrected,
Yes,
were they corrected in a timely way?
yes.
You didn't have to ask them repeatedly or check in with them?
We do have to do that occasionally, yes.
Okay. So when it says they have been corrected, is that without any prompting from the code office?
No, there is prompting.
Okay. Is it fair to say it was repeated prompting?
Sometimes.
Okay. I think we heard Attorney Orso when he was identifying, and I'll refer your attention back to exhibit, the discrepancies highlighted, so exhibit 4. And granted, this is an extremely long document, it was a 94-page document, correct?
Correct.
And that he had highlighted, pardon the pun, that there were only highlighted discrepancies on 4 or 5 pages of that lengthy document, is that correct?
Correct.
In your view, is just because it was only on 5 pages, does that mean those discrepancies are insignificant?
No, it was a particular discrepancy we were looking for that we highlighted.
So it's just one?
Right, there could
Okay.
be other discrepancies based on other ways of doing that report.
Okay, and I think one of the things that he himself testified to was his own experience of baseball coaching and weekends and booking rooms under, his name for several rooms, correct?
Correct.
And that's, that's a fair way to do things, people do that, correct?
Sure.
Perhaps just hypothetically. But in this particular case, and that's of course what we're dealing with, is this particular case, I would just direct our attention back to those 5 pages and names like, and then we'll cross-reference them, because you did create, as I understand it, this over 28-day spreadsheet, correct?
Correct.
So some of the names that were highlighted here, and when I say here, the discrepancies highlighted. For example, we have a Catherine Wilkerson, correct? Catherine Wilkerson appears on your exhibit 7, correct? And I'll direct your attention to it. So let's look at exhibit 7 over 28 days, right?
Yes.
So one of, and we're gonna kind of scroll back and forth here, is as between the discrepancies highlighted, where the suggestion was is that hypothetically, anybody could just rent 5, 10, 15 rooms out for a weekend, correct?
Sure.
Okay, so in this case though, what we're looking at is the facts here. And so Catherine Wilkerson, and I'm directing attention to page 182 of the discrepancies highlighted. Catherine Wilkerson is one of the individuals who seems to appear in multiple rooms at different times. Turning to exhibit 7, your over 28-day spreadsheet, Catherine Wilkerson is on that. So it appears that she was on the register on April 1st, 2022,
Yes,
and she was also on the register 4 months later.
yes.
So ostensibly, she wasn't just renting it for a weekend.
Objection. You realize we could object. Objection, it's beyond leading, it's giving her the answer to the question.
So I'll rephrase if you like. So Catherine Wilkerson appears on the over 28-day spreadsheet, correct?
Yes.
What was the date she first appeared on that registry? Or at least within the scope of what you looked at?
I have to look at the registry.
It's right here. Oh, so column C, you have the date.
Yeah.
Which, and so I'm not leading you. What is that date in column C?
Catherine Wilkinson, she is on 8/31. She starts on 4/1.
Yeah.
And up to 8/31, so. she
And
had a court date.
and just so we're clear, what do those two dates mean?
How long they stayed there when we looked at the date from 4/1,
Uh-huh.
not going back further than 4/1.
So ostensibly, it's a 4+ month period that Catherine
Yes.
Wilkerson. And also, I'm gonna direct your attention to the document that Attorney Orso provided to this board on October 27th, which itemizes those folks who are subject to the FED hearings. Do you have that document by chance?
I do, I think.
So I would ask you to turn to the second page of that. And it's fair to say Catherine Wilkerson appears on the FED list?
Yes,
And so if she appears on the FED list, safe to say she's been there for a substantial period of time?
yes.
And so it wouldn't just be a casual weekend necessarily that she's booked several rooms?
I would say not. No, not to my knowledge.
Okay. You were asked a question about, with respect to that building permit, that I think your testimony, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, and I'm sure Attorney Orso will, that there was still some outstanding issues there.
Yes, the final inspection.
And you were asked that, whether you had issued any further notices of violation in that regard,
Correct,
and you said that you did not.
correct.
I'm just wondering whether the fact that, and this is not just in this particular case, but generally speaking, if you don't issue a notice of violation on some particular issue, does that mean there is no violation?
No,
And why would it be that you don't always issue a notice of violation?
because we don't have time for one.
And there are other
And
things.
discretionary, we have discretionary authority.
Just one more moment, please. And Ms. Adams, if you don't know the answer, as you know, you don't always know the answer to a question. So if I'm asking you a question that you don't know the answer to, then the perfectly acceptable answer is I do not know.
Okay.
But I think it was posed to you in the question, in the context of the mustard and ketchup exhibit, right? Exhibit 8, that that there was some discrepancy about whether or not the logs for that particular day were examined. And it it does not appear here that we're talking about 9/28. In preparation for your testimony today, did you consult or confer with Irish Griffiths?
Yes,
And she prepared this?
yes,
She was the one who did the door knocking as well?
yes.
Are you aware whether or not she regarded or looked at or examined the logs for that day on September 28th?
Yes, she did.
How do you know that?
Objection. Okay, we have a document that was created not by this woman, that she's supposed to be testifying to, it's her exhibit. She is now, identifying that this document is either incorrect or misleading, because it doesn't say that. Again, here's the fundamental problem with the due process piece, is that if you're not gonna produce the witness, and you're gonna rely upon documents, you have to at least, you can't now recant your own document, when the witness isn't even here to ask about it.
I'm actually asking this question about a different document.
Well, no, you're asking this document right here. You asked if she looked at the registries on that date that she claims she did.
I did ask that question.
Yeah, and she says yes, which recants what's that whole document's telling us. Because it says on there that she looked at them on 9/26, only through 9/26.
But my question is, if I may, Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
the reason I asked that question is relevant to a different document. So you had spoken to Irish, correct?
Yes,
In preparation for today.
yes,
And you had asked whether or not she looked at the logs for 9/28
correct,
while she was there that day, correct?
correct.
Okay, so I'm directing your attention back to the document that was submitted by Attorney Orso. Again, this is the list of the FED, and you have that document in front of you?
Yes,
Okay, so, and again, if I'm not characterizing this correctly, you correct me, Attorney Orso will, I'm sure, jump in. But this itemizes the various dates on which FED proceedings are going to be held, correct?
correct.
And fair to say, and I would ask, usually FED proceedings, and when I say FED, it's eviction proceedings, assumes or presumes that there are actually people there who have to be evicted, correct?
Correct.
And when you spoke with, Irish, were any of the people on this list actually listed in the register for 9/28?
No,
Objection. Again, if she said, Irish's own document says she didn't look at the registry only through 9/26. So we're having a person that didn't even create these documents that's recounting a conversation she perhaps had that, again, recants that document and is in dispute with what her own exhibit.
So, if I may respond, first and foremost, and I think that this is something that Attorney Gay will advise you of as we move through these proceedings. One of the issues that has been raised is about the rules of evidence, whether hearsay, confronting, cross-examining, those kinds of issues are what the role of those rights are in a municipal context. I would submit to you that in a municipal context, in a municipal hearing, the rules of evidence do not apply. Similarly, when we talk about the rules of evidence, that's about hearsay. Hearsay is exactly what we're talking about here, is directly discussing with witnesses. Again, I know Attorney Orso has a different perspective, and that's why you have your own attorney who's going to be advising you on that. But what I am simply saying is that as we are preparing for this hearing, the code enforcement officer represents the code office. In her preparations, she has spoken, and this is not my testimony, I elicited this question from her for this very reason. I asked whether or not, in preparation for today, you spoke with Irish. I think the answer was yes.
yes, I
And
did.
so, let me just finish.
Yeah.
So what I am submitting to you is that anything that is elicited from Jodine, which may be secondhand or third hand, you, of course, as the triers of fact, have the ability to assess the credibility, the weight of that evidence. It's not that it doesn't come in. And so I would simply just leave it at that. I'm not gonna belabor that point, but
Here's the fundamental problem with that, is that the statute it says you have the right to confront witnesses. It doesn't say you have the right to confront secondhand witnesses. So I'm not saying the rules of evidence apply, but there's a distinction between confronting a witness and hearsay. They might serve the same purpose. That's why we have the hearsay rule, so you have the right to confront a witness. I think it's related to truthfulness too, and it's also related to veracity because of that telephone meeting we were talking about before. But the statute clearly states you have the right to confront witnesses. And this, under any circumstances, is a second-hand witness.
How does the statute define witness?
Well, I was looking that up and while we were
I just
waiting.
wanna, just while I ask, I'll get straight to the point since we don't have a lot of time. because my understanding right now of witness, just to speak to this point, is the witnesses that brought this forward that we're now considering, these in my mind are our witnesses. We don't speak as elected officials with, you know, Irish or, you know, the rank and file employees. So that's why I ask.
Sure, and again, if the issue was, I mean, this is a larger issue because you then have summaries of what people allegedly told you. That's essentially what you have here, right? Because you don't have the people that did the investigation on this document. So you're essentially just saying, this is a different issue than the one we talked about before. I still think that we have to I mean, that statute, because you're talking about something as fundamental as a business right, you're talking about revoking a license, taking away someone's livelihood. I mean, that I think would be strictly construed, what witness means. But this is a little bit different even from that. This is somebody else from the code office creating a document that the person that's presenting the evidence is now coming and saying, no, don't look at what she said there. But I want you to look at what she told me.
Again, I'm almost done, and I'm not gonna make my legal arguments, but I did wanna respond to one thing that Attorney Orso said. And again, this is why you have your own attorney who will advise you on this, and I understand it's a difficult issue. What I would simply say is this, is that Attorney Orso is absolutely right. It talks about the right to examine and cross-examine witnesses. Who are the witnesses? They're the ones that the town has selected to make these representations to the board. If the statute contemplated a full-blown court hearing, I would submit to you that they would not allow the municipal officers to be conducting these hearings, because they know that you're good, amazing, intelligent volunteers, but you're not judges and juries. You are the jury essentially here, but you're not attorneys and you're not lawyers and you're not judges, right? So if the contemplation was for a full-scale hearing with all of the pomp and circumstance and rules of court attributable to such proceedings, then it wouldn't allow the municipal officers to be having these proceedings. Rather, it would go straight to court with all of those trappings. So I'll just leave it at that.
The reality is, though, that you don't have to have all the rules of evidence playing and be in effect. We do this administratively all the time. Every administrative office that you go up to Augusta and you have a hearing in front of the physical therapist office, those rules of evidence don't apply, but you're talking about a license and you have the right to confront your witnesses. This is very similar to that. This is an administrative process that you don't have courts. This is not a judge. I understand that. And the rules of evidence don't apply, but you have the right to confront your witnesses.
So I'd like to offer a couple of things here. First of all, Attorney Orso has made his objections. They're on the record, and certainly if this comes to an appeal, you can raise those on appeal. The other thing is that, excuse me, allergies. The public hearing is being continued to another date. If Attorney Orso believes that there's a witness that needs to be present, he can call that witness. But it's gonna still be an open public hearing, so he can remedy that if he wants to, but he's put his objection on the record. He can raise that on appeal if he feels he needs to.
We hear you.
I understand.
I don't wanna belabor the point though, we've got the 5 minutes, and no, I don't mean that, I mean that with all due respect, I just wanna move past that, I think we all understand what you're
My wife
saying.
says that all the time, so I'm good.
Yeah, is that, do you have anything further on
I
your?
don't, but thank you for asking. I appreciate it.
Alright, is there anybody, we've got 5 minutes, is there anybody from the public that would like to speak? We're gonna continue it, I assure you folks, apologize, we obviously underestimated how much time this was going to take. If anybody would like to speak, please come up to the podium, state your name, and address your concern to the chair. Seeing none?
You could, Mr. Chairman, if I could jump in.
Yes.
You could schedule the continuation right now, you're the board.
If we, I have no problem with that.
And the attorneys are all here.
I would prefer that, but I did not want to cut off anybody's ability to speak, especially from the public.
Yeah, I agree, but it doesn't appear that
No,
there's anyone
okay.
that's gonna speak.
Well, let's discuss rescheduling then.
You could do it,
Do you
say,
know when this room is gonna be available?
well, we'll make it available. You could do it at 3 p.m., say on the 15th, when you have a meeting that evening. Or you could do it at 3 p.m. on the 14th, the day before, even though the room might be booked again at 7 p.m. But at 3 p.m., which you essentially came here today at 3, should give you enough time. And the attorneys have 2 weeks of warning, and
And-
they could speak up now if it's a problem.
Right, I have a meeting in Elliott on the 15th.
What time?
Why do we have to wait so
5:30.
long?
You don't. You can do this tomorrow.
Why can't we do this on the third,
Yeah, I can't do the third. I have a funeral to attend.
the seventh,
What day of the week is the 7th?
Monday?
You
Okay.
and the board.
I don't have a problem. I'll let everybody else, my schedule's
The 7th
usually
would be
pretty
fine.
I
flexible.
hate to
For me.
do one, but I'm gonna be in Toronto.
Toronto,
Cindy, are you able to do a 3 o'clock? Before
day?
the day that you have your Elliott planning board?
As long as I can get out of here by
that?
I
quarter
think they
5.
said the 15th,
No,
right?
that's
'Cause
getting-
can we do the 15th? Like
Well,
3?
I mean, alright, you're gonna, what are the dates for your Toronto trip?
I'm coming back that night.
Okay,
so-
so we have the 8th, the 9th, the 10th, the 11th, the entirety of,
The 10th would be great.
Mr. Chairman, I think I may have missed a beat. Is it possible for everyone to schedule the 15th, like at 3 p.m. because you're all gonna be here beforehand? I think
Yeah, I
Attorney
will.
Orso said he could.
It's the second day of the
then.
trial for me, but I'll make sure the court says I'll be here by 3.
just addressing Selectman Foley's concern about the length of time. I think that there was some interest in continuing this as soon as possible.
Right. So we looked at all the dates. What's today, the first, second, third, fourth?
I asked
Is it 10th?
select person Roach to review the tape.
Right, cause he can't do it on a Friday.
Is the 9th?
Is that a Wednesday?
It's a Wednesday.
Right, yep.
I can do the 9th. It'd be
No issue with
The
that.
lodging committee, it appears to be here till about, is it 4?
Yes.
So you could do it at 4:30
Fine
on the
with me.
9th. 4:30 on the 9th.
Does that work for everybody?
Yep.
Jodine, when was your trip?
I just had it.
You just had it, okay, alright. When we were trying to coordinate this originally, there were so many different scheduling
Scheduling,
I
conflicts.
actually
Yeah.
teach a class that night, but I'll try to
Chief, are you leaving town?
schedule it.
Yes, but I'm leaving tomorrow morning, I'll be back Friday.
Okay. So November 9th at 3 p.m. at 4:30, at 4:30 p.m.
It would be tricky, but
So mark that
I
one.
hate to be back, it seems like it's all my dates, but does the 10th work for you?
It's a Thursday.
Right,
Mechanics.
Happens to be my 70th birthday, but that's okay.
We'll bring a cupcake.
There you go. I am a couple.
Oh,
teach a class at USM, it's every Wednesday.
Does the 10th, how's the 10th look?
10th is good.
It's a Thursday.
Okay.
What'd you say?
I have a conflict that night, I'm sorry.
Can we do it earlier in the day?
At 3,
This thing starts at 5:30 up in Portland, so I think it's problematic, but I'll if that's the only date, I'll figure it out.
3 on the 10th.
What happened to the 9th?
she has
I
to
teach
teach.
class on Wednesdays at USM.
So you get to have your cake now.
I mean, I need to do 2:30, but I mean, that would be,
No, we're going back to the 10th, that's my birthday.
okay.
Oh, sorry.
So November 10th at, what am I hearing? 3?
I think it was.
3.
3, everybody 3?
Yeah, I'm fine with
Are
that.
you okay with that?
Yeah, no, like I said,
Is
just,
that gonna give us enough time? Because by all evidence, this is gonna take a while.
Well, we can always set it 2.
Well, I think the room's as far as I can tell, the room's open that night.
well, Attorney Grecian
that's right.
has.
I can get somebody to cover it.
Well,
if
you
I
can
need to.
start earlier then.
That's
It's,
why I say, what, you wanna start at 2 or 2:30? I mean.
I'd start at 9. I'm here, you're paying me.
This is Thursday, gosh.
You can get somebody to cover you
On
on
the
the-
10th, I'll figure it out, don't worry about it, we'll just schedule it.
10th at 3?
Yes.
Okay.
Attorney Orso?
Yes, great, thank you very much.
Alright.
So let me do the.
Yeah? if
I
that works for
move to continue the public hearing to November 10th. Am I get that right? Yeah.
Yep.
9th.
Tenth.
It's the 10th, okay, November 10th at 3 o'clock in the afternoon at 208 Stanford Road here in the Littlefield Meeting Room.
Second.
All those in favor? 4-0. Thank you, folks, for coming out. We will see you then. Oh, do we have a motion to adjourn?
I make a motion, we adjourn.
All those in favor? 4-0.
Okay, so I just wanna make sure I kept this right, cause I got some different dates on here. The
10 to
10th
3.
at 3.
Yeah, 10 to 3.
I said 3, right?
You said 3. Yeah, the third is my 13th wedding anniversary, but
Miss,
we're going right now. They're meeting me in the parking lot.
oh my God, thank God.